Welcome to this multi-location meeting of the Community Finance and Strategic Leadership Scrutiny Committee on the 28th of November 2024. I'm Councillor Phil Rogers and I'll be chairing this meeting. Please ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. I wish to remind members who are signing in remotely of their legal obligation to have their cameras switched on during the meeting, please, in order to be seen and heard whilst participating in council business. In addition, when asked to raise your hand, if members who are virtually viewing this meeting could raise your electronic hand, and for members in the council chamber, just raise your hand. Thank you. On to agenda item 2. This is the declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Reynolds.
I'd like to declare my interest under the item on third sector grants, please, as a recipient of core funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Are there any other declarations, please? It doesn't appear so. We'll move on then. Thank you. Agenda item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting. You will see the minutes attached to pages 5 to 20 of your agenda pack. If you feel these minutes are accurate record of the meeting, are there any questions on the minutes of the meeting? Again, doesn't appear so. I'm quite happy to propose this. Can I have a seconder, please?
Second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henton. If members do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that these minutes are approved.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Chair. The minutes are approved.
Many thanks, Alison. On to part 1 of the meeting. Agenda item 4, to consider items selected from the Cabinet Forward Work Programme. We'll now move to consider the reports as selected by this committee for consideration. Agenda item 4A, the Strategic Equality Plan Annual Report 2023 to 2024. Officers, do you have anything further to add to the report? Thank you, Noelwyn.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Just to state that this is the final annual report predicated on the Strategic Equality Plan that was approved for 2020-2024. And clearly it outlines how we are, as an authority, set about meeting the public sector equality duty. Members may remember that you deliberated and discussed the Strategic Equality Plan for 2024-2028 just before the summer, and that was approved in Cabinet in July and in Council in September. The cover sheet itself picks out a number of key deliverables that were put in place during 2023-2024. And we are happy to take any questions, Chair. Diolch.
Many thanks, Noelwyn. When we came to pre-briefing, we didn't have any questions on this initially. Can I ask if there are any questions on this at the moment? And, sorry, my glasses are a bit. Over to our leader, Councillor Steve Hunt, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Phil. It's not a question. I just want to give my apologies that I couldn't be with you in person. I failed to get back from my previous appointment this morning, so I thought I'd join not to miss the meeting. I'm down in the Swansea.com building, so I'm joining from there this afternoon. Thank you, Phil.
Many thanks, Steve. Thank you, Leader. I appreciate you been chairing a meeting this morning, and it's difficult to get away, so many thanks. Are there any questions on the Strategic Equality Plan, please? Okay, it doesn't appear so I'm going to move on this. The recommendations are listed on page 22 of the agenda pack. I'm happy to propose it. Can I have a seconder, please?
Second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henton. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this recommendation is supported.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Chair. The recommendation is supported.
Thanks again, Alison. Moving on. Agenda item 4B, the Strategic Risk Register. Easy for me to say. Cabinet members and officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report? Noelwyn?
Diolch, Cadeirydd. What I'd first of all like to do is outline some of the significant changes that have taken place with regards to the Strategic Risk Register over the last 12 months since it was last brought to this Scrutiny Committee. Firstly, it is my intention that this comes to yourselves on a 6-monthly basis moving forward. Previously, it was presented to you in an Excel sheet, which was very difficult for members to navigate and to read. You see, in terms of this presentation, it's changed. We've now got a page pretty much per risk within the strategic risk register. Some of the other changes that have taken place, you'll also notice that we have inserted an inherent risk score and a residual risk score. Before, all you'd have had was a RAG rating of green, amber, or red. That matrix that we use in terms of likelihood and impact with risks of 5 by 5. So the maximum score you can get is 25, which would be at the top end of the red. And then obviously, likewise in terms of the green, would be a 2. In terms of the importance of that, the discussion might be different if you were looking at a risk, at a residual risk score that was still quite high in the red compared to one that was in the red but a low residual risk score. So that's one change that we've made so that we have a feel for where those risks are positioning themselves. What we also did during the summer as a strategic leadership team of directors and the chief executive was to put in place a risk appetite statement. Now, the importance of a risk appetite statement is so that we understand where we pitch ourselves in terms of as an authority, our appetite for the risks contained within the strategic risk register. The risk appetite statement is appended within the report, and the principles are based on the government's Orange Book of Management of Risk Principles and Concepts. And you have the risk appetite, and that's defined as averse, minimalist, cautious, open, and eager, and then a number of risk categories as well. That's work in progress. What we need to do now is make sure that we align our strategic risk register to our risk appetite statement. You'll notice within the presentation template as well, there's one area that is not completed yet, and that's the target risk score. The purpose of that is we've got an inherent risk, which is based on the expertise of the officers responsible for those risks. They've put mitigation actions in place, they've put controls in place, and they believe now that the residual risk is what it is. What we need to decide as an authority is that a risk we can tolerate at that level, or do we want it to be reduced? So what is our target risk for that particular one? So like I said, that's not yet in place, and it will be something by the time we come back to you as members in the next scrutiny committee, that will be something that will be there for you to see. So this has been progress in over the last 12 months in ensuring that we have a far more robust strategic risk register. It was discussed at the Governance and Audit Committee as well last Friday, and officers are present in the room today to take any questions you may have on it, Chair. Diolch.
Many thanks, Lynwen. We'll move now next to members' questions. I've had a few indications initially. First up is Councillor Sarah Thomas, please.
Thank you. Yes, so under the Appendix 3 on page 118 in the pack, the SR06, it says that if there is insufficient capital and revenue resources, then it could cause problems. I feel like that should be listed a bit more often under other things as well for other directorates. And then the other one that I had was on page 119, SR25, which says if the council does not invest sufficient time, money and effort into decarbonisation and appropriate technical solutions are not available, then we will not achieve the net zero target aspirations. And I feel, first of all, that aspirations is the wrong word, because based on the decarbonisation seminar we had the other day, there would be fines in place if we didn't do that. But also on that seminar, it didn't really look like we're on track to hit that target. So I feel like that risk should be significantly higher than it is currently. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Thomas. We'll bring in Hugh for this one, please.
Thank you. So in relation to the question on SR06, that covers the council's entire financial planning arrangement. So that's not director specific. That's saying really that if we think we're going to have insufficient funding for 2025-26, then basically what can we do about it? And the mitigation plan there talks about the lobbying, etc., etc. You'll be familiar with the work that we've done to date around progressing the budget for next year, which is very much work in progress at the moment, given the amount of unknowns in the system. But in terms of it being mentioned more often, that actually does cover the whole council. So just wanted to clarify that, Chair. Diolch.
Thank you, Hugh. Going to bring Nolwenn in as well, please. Thank you.
So picking up on the other observation you made, Councillor, I think it was SR25, wasn't it, around the decarbonisation
Thank you, Nolwenn. Councillor Thomas, would you like to come back in?
Thank you. Yes. So on the directorate thing, surely some of the directorates are more risk of having a lack of funds, for example, social services and so on, than others. So should they not get their own entry in the risk register? Is what I'm sort of suggesting. And on the other one, I still feel like it should be increased. Like it's green at the minute. I think it should be at least orange. Like I think if we're going to miss it, then it needs to be a higher risk rating.
Bring Hugh back in a second then. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, very good points. So this is the strategic risk register. So it covers the council as a whole. Each directorate will have their own directorate risk register that sits under this. So they will then pick up at a directorate level the more specific risks around those services. But as you say, there are services that we know. So to name them again, as I always do, social services, schools, homelessness, home to school transport, are all under more significant pressure than perhaps others. And that detail will be picked up in those directorate risk registers. So thank you.
Thank you. And Nolwenn as well. Thank you.
Bit of a dual act going on here. I just think it'll be last point, Councillor Thomas. It's a fair point. And that's something I'll feed back to Simon Brennan, who's the head of service leading that at the moment, although I am also the strategic lead from a strategic leadership team perspective. I think it's a valid point you're making. I think we need to review our positioning on that particular strategic risk. Diolch.
Thank you, Nolwenn. Can I bring the leader in back in at this point as well? Steve Hunt, please.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Thanks, Chair. I just want to re-emphasise for Councillor Thomas that what Councillor Nolwenn and Hugh have said is spot on, really. But we continue to lobby Welsh Government. If we are going to meet net zero targets, and that's not just in Neath but Talbot, that's right across Wales, then funding packages need to come with it for the reasons Nolwenn has indicated. It's going to be a difficult task for all councils across Wales. However, in Neath Talbot, as you will be aware, Tata Steel now, with the blast furnaces being removed, an electric arc furnace probably in situ in the next 3 years, will help Neath Talbot with our targets. But it's an ambitious target, in my opinion, with my conversations with ministers and cabinet secretaries, unless they can find the funding to support the journey, which we're all on and we all want to reach, and we'll continue to try our best to get to that figure, I'm sure, collectively. But it's going to be a difficult challenge, I can assure you. But I'm sure with all members, we'll do our best. But thank you.
Many thanks, Leader. Next up, I have Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Sorry, can I come back on one point, please, Chair?
Okay, Councillor Thomas.
it was going back to the directorates having their own ones, but I mean, some of those services are statutory services, and I feel like that does impact the whole council. So maybe they should be included on this one.
Sorry, Hugh.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, but-
Yeah, we can have a look at maybe referencing some of those in terms of the narrative on this one, and so that they're visible as part of the strategic risk register.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Dear Cadero, thank you. Yeah, just before I go into my specific question, just in terms of the overall presentation of the risk register as it is now, I think it is better than it was before. So, thanks for making those changes. I think we can identify some of these things a lot more clearly now and sort of delve into the nuances of some of those risks. And I was wondering why the target risks were blank, but you've covered that now, and so I think that'll come now in a later report. In terms of my specific question, on page 120 of the papers, it references that SR23 has been removed and school buildings are included in SR01 infrastructure. SR23 is actually still in the report. I'm not sure if that was an omission, but the question I've got is, in terms of SR01, that infrastructure risk is owned by Nicola Pierce as the Environment Director, whereas SR23 was an an education department sort of risk owned by Andrew Thomas. So I'm just wondering the mechanics of that in terms of school buildings, which is what SR23 was referring to, so failure of buildings for learning and the impacts on that. Is that particular risk now sitting with property side of the council rather than the education directorate? Am I reading that correctly? Is that a transfer of risk ownership as well as a merging of the two risks in the register? Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Bring Nolwenn back in on this one again, please.
Diolch, Councillor Percy. Yes, you've fully understood the narrative there in terms of what's taking place with that particular risk. There was a discussion at the strategic leadership team with directors. Clearly, heads of schools have autonomy on school buildings. However, all infrastructure works in terms of building services and maintenance is undertaken by the team within the Environment Department. They carry the overall strategic risk in terms of all our assets and infrastructure. It made sense that we then merged both of them together. I don't believe it dilutes that risk. We have a risk not just in our school buildings, but other buildings as well. So you are correct, Councillor Percy, in your interpretation of that. Diolch.
Thank you, Nolwenn. Councillor Percy, would you like to come back?
Yeah, only briefly, if that's okay, Chair. No, I appreciate you clarifying that, Nolwenn. Just in terms of sort of understanding that change, obviously that does make some sense. My understanding previously is that there was perhaps some funding within the Education Directorate that was looking at maintenance and repair of school buildings. Is that now all sitting in property? Is that entire sort of decision making chain of where to allocate the money in terms of addressing the risks in that building portfolio all sitting in property now and outside of education, or education still having some input in terms of investment into those?
Hang on, we got somebody else talking. Please mute the mic, please. Thank you, Councillor Percy. Yeah, we've got your question. Hand over to Hugh with this one, please.
Yeah, thank you. So you're quite correct, Councillor Percy, that the budget for school maintenance still sits within the education central department budget, and colleagues within that directorate then work, as they always have done, in conjunction with Simon Brennan's teams in terms of identifying priorities for school maintenance. And obviously there's a prioritisation, and then there's obviously the urgent work that comes with the system in terms of things going wrong in schools, which are all paid for from that very same pot. So no change in terms of budget management, just the change in Nolwenn outlined just now. Thank you.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Percy?
It clarifies the position, but I think perhaps Nolwenn can maybe understand where I'm getting at. If there's perhaps a disparity between the day-to-day budget management and the overall risk, that may be slightly tricky. I understand the departments work together, but I think I'm trying to get my head around who is taking overall responsibility for spending or taking a decision to, deal with a risk here or there. is that being done in education or in property? And I think if property are owning the risk, then ultimately they need to be the people making that decision. That's the way my brain is kind of looking at this from a logical perspective in terms of identifying who is taking responsibility ultimately.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Bring Noelwyn in last time, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Percy. I fully understand exactly where you're coming from. Your questions make absolute sense in that respect. In terms of that detailed understanding, and I will take that back to both Andrew and Nicola, and we'll get back to you with an answer with regards to that outside of this meeting, if that's okay with yourself. Diolch.
Yeah, dim problem, diolch.
Hey, thank you both. Thank you. Move along. Next question I have had up was from Councillor Rob Jones. Unfortunately, Councillor Jones has had to go to a medical appointment this afternoon, but he did bring up it's on a bit about the report about the colouring. Oh, sorry, Councillor Reynolds. Sorry.
Sorry, I think under Rob Jones's issue it was resolved. It was probably his iPad, but I think it's an issue around that. However, I wanted just to follow on from Councillor Percy's question and suggest that part of that look that Noelwyn takes at that report is reinstatement of the risk in education, because I think it's not about general business continuity, it's about education and our ability to meet our statutory responsibility to educate people.
Noelwyn?
I take that back to the director. I think that particular risk is in reference to the infrastructure itself, the building itself, not necessarily the delivery of the education agenda. Diolch.
Councillor Reynolds?
It does talk about business continuity. The business is education.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Duly noted. Okay. Are there any more questions, please, on item 4B, the strategic risk register, please? I can't see any further questions. This report is for noting, and we now duly note that. Thank you. Moving along to agenda item 4C, the Corporate Plan Annual Report for 2023-2024. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report? Noelwyn?
Only very briefly, Chair. So this is the Corporate Plan Annual Report based on the corporate plan that was in place from 2022 to 2027, and it articulates the progress made in delivering those aims during 23-24. So it's very much a look back at those 12 months. Obviously, since then, Council has approved a revised corporate plan for 2024 to 2027. And within today's pack, you obviously have the half-year report on that particular iteration of our corporate plan. But officers here are happy to take any questions on what we can as a directorate. Diolch.
Thank you, Noelwyn. We'll move to members' questions next. And I have an indication from Councillor Reynolds. Question on this issue, please.
I have no memory of having a question.
I've got noted, what is the change of total value available?
That's on the next item.
Oh, is it?
Sorry.
Oh, see. Oh, right, I see. Sorry, it's my own noting. So sorry on that one. Just checking. Yeah, on this one, I'm looking at the wrong one. I've got a question on this, actually. It's about the arrows and the colours, if that's okay. Page 170. There's a couple here. I'm worried that we don't want to show that we're actually improving things when they're not. About no new measure, number of volunteer hours, no new measure, increase to 2279. How do we know it's an increase? And why is it green if you can't measure it against something? It may have gone down in hours. Should that be neutral until we got figures to match it against? Yeah. The next one up is the following page. Number of people subject to antisocial behaviour warning. 6. Increase. 6. It has moved, but it's still green. Should it be grey? Yeah. Page 188. I am concerned, being a mathematician, and we don't give the wrong impression with our things that things are, we're doing better when they're not improvements. Again, I think this is, there's one on there. It's to follow, is it? Total value of the funds secured to enhance the quality of visitor experience. 2022-23 is to follow, yet we've still got it going up and green. And my final one is 289. Number of PM10 breaches in the air quality management. 2022-23 was 30. We want to maintain it, and at the end of 23-24, it's actually gone down. But I thought breaches, the fact that breaches are going down would be a good thing. So should that be green, not red? Yeah, Wildman?
Thank you, Chair. I can take those back to the officers. Obviously, we collate the information for each of the directorates. I take your point, though, that when there are new measures, I think generally the feeling is that the progress is being made. But take your point on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mathematician head, that's the problem with me. Thank you. Any more questions on this one, please? The annual report. Can't see any. This one's for noting, so we duly note the report. Thank you. Agenda item 4D. Now I got on to the right one. Sorry, Councillor Reynolds. This is the third sector grants and commissioning arrangements. Officers, do you have anything further to add? Hugh?
Oh, nothing further to add, Chair. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Lovely, thanks, Hugh. Let's move to members' questions, and we hopefully get it right this time. Councillor Reynolds, please.
Thank you, Chair. You did give me slight heart failure there. Yeah, my memory's going. Right. It's in relation initially, two questions. In relation initially to page 2021, with the final paragraph, which talks about the amounts available for this grant pot. Can you indicate how much was available last year and whether this is the same or whether this has decreased?
So that is exactly the same amount that was available last year. I think we are committed to increasing the pot by the proposed increase in revenue support grant for the following year. We were forecasting a 0% increase in RSG, so it's the same amount of money in the pot. You will be aware that last year we under allocated on the pot, but this is reinstating the total pot, which I think is probably what you're asking.
Thank you, Hugh. Councillor Reynolds, would you like to come back in?
That Hugh knows me too well. That is what I was asking. And I wanted to move on to the other question. There's a slight change this year, it feels, in the application forms and the way we're putting them out. That's pre the review. It appears to say in the guidance application form, there's now an upper limit of £25,000, and but then goes on to say excluding core funding. My understanding from discussions about this within the Voluntary Sector Liaison Committee was that it was very much looking to fund core activities that were unfundable from other areas. And I know there are a number of groups out there that depend on core funding. So what's the exclusion here? And some of the grants that have been received for core funding that aren't on the 3-year at the moment are over £25,000.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. We bring Hugh back in then, please.
So as you say, Councillor Reynolds, we've got 6 organisations who we're committed to co-funding to the tune of £350,000 for next year as part of the 3-year agreement. What we've proposed with this is to cap at £25,000 purely to make the pot go further. We've tightened up the criteria, so we're looking for projects that will specifically help deal with certain priority areas. And we thought that it was appropriate that it should be a project-specific pot as opposed to a co-funding pot. However, obviously this is scrutiny, and the decision will be for Cabinet to actually determine this. So if you want to feed those scrutiny comments into the final Cabinet report, then we can do that.
Councillor Reynolds.
I would be very definitely wanting to do it. Members of Cabinet will know that the comments by the liaison group were about the need for core support, and there are groups that are not in the 3-year funding for various reasons, some of which were in that 3-year group, who receive currently more than 25 and rely on it.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Hugh, please.
Yeah, just to come back just on my point, sorry, this is due for Cabinet next Wednesday, so the papers have been published, so we will have to, I will update Cabinet verbally on that next week because it's too late to change the papers now, and then Cabinet will obviously take on board those observations.
Thank you, Hugh. I'm sure Councillor Reynolds will welcome that. Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Are there any more questions on this item, please? 4D. This is a third sector grant. I can't see any. The recommendation is listed on page 216 of the agenda pack. And given that Hugh is going to carry the information, I'm happy to propose this. Can I have a seconder, please?
Second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henton. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this recommendation is supported. Thank you.
I can see no indications the contrary, Chair. The recommendation is supported.
Thank you, Alison. Moving on to part 2. This is agenda item 5, to consider items from the Scrutiny Committee Forward Work Programme. I can report there's no Scrutiny Committee Forward Work Programme items to be considered at this meeting. On to part 3. Agenda item 6, performance monitoring. We will now move to consider the performance monitoring items. Agenda item 6A, strategy and corporate services, delivery plan and half-yearly monitoring. Officers, would you like to add anything additional? Olwen?
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Thank you. So what we presented you today is, across my directorate, we have 3 key service areas: digital services, organisational development, and people management, and legal services with Craig. These 3 services are critical in underpinning the delivery of the whole corporate plan in terms of the enabling programme and the services that they provide in supporting the rest of the authority to do their work. It was felt that it was essential for us to have the delivery plans in place and for you to see how the team are progressing in terms of delivering against those plans. There's very little reference to the Directorate services within the corporate plan, hence why those have come before you today, Chair, for scrutiny. Diolch.
Thank you, Olwen. We'll now move to members' questions. We didn't have any at the pre-briefing, but I can notice now as I look up. Councillor Percy, please.
Yeah, dear Cadeirydd, an observation really in terms of how some of this is set out really, and it applies to this item and the following item where I had indicated in pre-briefing. I think in terms of setting out the priorities and the narrative around those, again, there's very welcome detail in terms of progress made against those priorities, and I can understand with a kind of open-ended priority and a narrative how some of these items are on track. Where I'm less convinced in terms of how things are being presented, and this said applies to the following item, which covers the whole corporate plan, where we have specific performance measures, we have quite a lot of those, well, almost all of them are listed as on track across the 2 documents, but what they don't tell us is what the target is. So a few of the measures, just in their description, have a target. And then you can understand the on track or not on track RAG rating. But for quite a lot of them, it looks like they're just being reported as data without a target, yet they're shown as on track. And I can understand that there'll be a need to report some data without a target just for data reporting's sake. And in that case, I don't think we should be marking them as green if we're just monitoring. And where there are targets, I think we need to be specific as to what they are. And I'll just give an example. We've got percentage of employees who leave the council, whether on a voluntary or involuntary basis during the year. Now that is showing as on track. And we have 2 sets of data, but it sounds to me like that's just an open-ended piece of data being reported rather than that we're on track to a specific target. So I just think we need to be really careful there, because I think there's a lot of this data that isn't target driven. And I think some of it might be, and the targets are not included. And so this applies to this one and the following document. And I think it's just something that needs to be taken back in terms of how we report those performance measures, because we've got a lot of really useful priority data, narrative and performance measures here, but I just think the reporting presentation is confusing and sometimes a little unhelpful. Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. My apologies about that. In my notes, I had you noted for the next one. I forgot it was covering both, so my apologies for that. We'll pass over to Nolwenn now, please.
Diolch yn fawr, Percy. I fully accept your observation with regards to the need for you to know what the target was. We're saying it's on track. We're giving you the result maybe, but we're not actually giving you the target in terms of what direction we're trying to head in. So fully accept that observation, and it's certainly something that we will take back to look at. I think when you're presenting performance monitoring data, some of it is qualitative, i.e. a narrative. It's a subjective view on whether we're getting something done or not. And then you have the quantitative one, so numbers, figures, ins and outs, etc., which is far easier to a certain extent to understand whether you are on track or not, and less open to subjectivity. Then you've got the evidence backing up those figures. So there is definitely work to be done to ensure that we have the best suite of both quantifiable and qualitative data in our monitoring reports, and we'll certainly take those comments back for further discussion at our senior leadership team. Councillor Percy.
Thank you, Nolwenn. Councillor Percy, would you like to come back in, or are you happy?
Yeah, just briefly, I appreciate that, Nolwenn. I think, I understand in terms of the qualitative stuff that, the narrative gives you the explanation, but I think particularly the quantitative data and the performance measures, once you start looking through those, there's quite a lot there that is just, I just think, in a little bit of a mess in terms of how it's been presented. Because I think there might be targets to some of them that we just can't see them, and I think some of them have no targets, and I just may need to split the report up into sections where we actually have performance targets and sort of information performance monitoring as well. I don't know. Perhaps there's something we can take up outside the meeting if it needs further discussion. Yeah.
Many thanks, Councillor Percy. Yeah, I think it's a fair point, and it has been duly noted. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions, please, on 6A, the strategy and corporate services delivery plan and half-yearly monitoring? I cannot see anything. So this again is a report for noting, and we duly note it. Thank you. On to agenda item 6B, the corporate plan for 2024 to 2027, half-yearly update for the 2024-2025 year. Officers, would you like to add anything else to this one?
Nothing further to add to this one, Chair. Diolch.
Thank you, Nolwenn. I did have Councillor Percy down for this. Was it the same point, Councillor Percy?
Yeah, it was just the same general point, Chair. Diolch.
Lovely, thank you. Unfortunately, Councillor Rob Jones isn't available. I think he did want to speak, but I don't recall what he was on this one, unless any of his colleagues. Nope, not given any. Any other questions on this one then, please? I can't see any. Again, this report is for noting, and it is now duly noted. Thank you. On to agenda item 7, which is part 4. Oh, I got 7. What is 7? Yeah, sorry. And we move straight to agenda item 8, sorry, from 7. Sorry. Selection of items for future scrutiny. The numbers are confusing me, and I'm a mathematician, sorry. Selection of items for future scrutiny. These are on pages 423 to 442 of our report. Alison, would you like to give an update on this one, please?
Thanks, Chair. So I can just confirm that we haven't got any further additional items which have been added to the Cabinet Forward Work Programme in relation to this committee. But I would take the opportunity to remind members of the 2 meetings following the Christmas period on the 9th of January and the 13th of January. They're in quite close succession, so just ensure that members have those meetings and the relevant pre-briefings accepted into their diaries, please.
Many thanks, Alison. Anybody got any comments they'd like to make on the Forward Work Programme? I can't see any indication. Thank you very much, Alison. On to agenda item 9. Any urgent items at the discretion of the chairperson, pursuant to section 100BA 6B of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended. You'll be delighted to hear that there are no urgent items this afternoon. that just brings me to thank you all for your attendance and your contributions to the meeting, and hopefully we've had some of our queries or most of our queries answered, and obviously officers are available if you need any further queries on this, and my thanks to the officers for all their hard work in coming, bringing all the reports to us this afternoon. Thank you all, and I'll see you all again soon.
Thanks all.
Phil.
Diolch pawb.
Bye.